Hello, family. Please subscribe. Enjoy your story.
Alan, stay with me! Wake up!
Wait, no. No, you don't understand. They tried to kill me. Alan's voice cracked through the silence. Sharp, uneven, like he was still trying to catch up with his own reality. My own siblings. They hit me, threw me into the ocean like I was nothing. He paused, not because he was done speaking, but because some truths are too heavy to say all at once. You could hear it in his breathing, slightly off, like every word dragged something painful back to the surface. I trusted them. I actually trusted them. That last part didn't land strong. It broke, and somehow that made it worse. Because this wasn't just about money, or power, or even survival. It was about betrayal, the kind that doesn't come from strangers, but from people who know your name, your habits, your weak spots, people who sat at your table, people you called family. And now, they were the reason he almost didn't make it out alive. Welcome back to Alec's Romance and Divorce Stories, where life's most powerful lessons come wrapped in unforgettable tales. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered what happens when two completely different worlds collide? When wealth meets humility, when pride meets quiet strength, and when secrets, carefully hidden, start slipping through the cracks? What happens when the person you trust the least ends up being the only one who refuses to let you fall? Before we go further, bestie, real quick, go ahead and like this video. Drop a comment, even if it's just where you're watching from, because it genuinely helps push this story out to more people. And trust me, you're going to want to stay till the end of this one, because the man you just heard, he didn't just survive, he came back, stronger, sharper, and with a truth that changed everything. But here's the part nobody saw coming. The person who saved his life was the one he never trusted. And what that led to? Well, let's just say, not everyone walked away the same. Now, stay with me for a second. Because this story didn't start with violence. It didn't even start with betrayal. It started with something much quieter. Success. Alan wasn't supposed to rise the way he did. Not in that family. Not with what he was given. See, when their father shared his wealth, it looked fair on paper. Equal portions, equal opportunity. But reality, it didn't feel equal. Some had connections. Some had guidance. Some had doors opened before they even knocked. Alan, he got a share. And silence. No support. No real belief. Just expectation, low, quiet, almost dismissive. And maybe that's what pushed him, because in just 2 months, he turned what he was given into something nobody could ignore. Not just growth, control, influence, money that moved fast, decisions that hit harder, a company that didn't just exist, it dominated. And suddenly, the same siblings who barely checked on him were watching him closely. Too closely. At first, it looked like curiosity, casual questions here and there. So, how are you scaling this fast? What kind of deals are you closing? But the tone, it wasn't admiration. It was calculation. Then one day, they showed up, not separately, together, smiling, polite, almost too polite. They sat across from him, relaxed, like this was just family catching up. But it didn't feel like that. Not really. We've been thinking, one of them said, leaning forward slightly. It's time we build something together. Alan didn't respond immediately. He just looked at them, measured, careful. Together, how? A brief pause, a glance between them. Then, we join your company. There it was. Clean, direct. But something about it felt off, like the decision had already been made. And they were just informing him. Alan leaned back slowly. No, just one word. No anger, no hesitation, just clarity. And that word? It changed everything. Because in that moment, the room shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but you could feel it. The smiles didn't disappear. But they didn't stay real either. No, one of them repeated, a small laugh slipping out. Alan's tone stayed calm. Everyone should grow individually. Mixing everything now creates problems later. That should have been enough. Reasonable, logical, but logic doesn't settle wounded pride. Something tightened in the air, unspoken, heavy, and right there. That was the moment this story truly began. Not on the boat, not in the water, but in that quiet refusal. Because when people feel entitled to what you've built, rejection doesn't feel like a decision. It feels like an insult. And from that point on, they stopped trying to join him. They started thinking about how to take everything. And the only person who noticed that shift was someone Alan barely trusted. Someone who watched more than she spoke. Someone who understood danger long before it showed itself. Arya, and what she overheard, what she chose to do with it, and what it cost her to step in. Well, that's where things stopped being simple. Arya wasn't part of their world, not the way they defined it. She didn't come from money, didn't speak with entitlement, didn't walk into rooms expecting doors to open. She worked, observed, listened more than she talked. And maybe that's why she noticed what others missed. That day, she wasn't even meant to hear anything. She had just stepped away from the sitting room, Alan's children laughing behind her, cartoons playing softly in the background. Everything normal, everything calm. And then, voices, low, careful, his siblings. She paused, not intentionally. Just something in their tone made her stop. He won't agree, one voice said. A quiet response followed. Then we stop asking. There was a brief silence, the kind that doesn't feel empty, just loaded, and then we take him out. No distractions, no interruptions. Arya's fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the wall. Her heart didn't race, not yet. It just shifted, and after that, everything becomes ours. She didn't move immediately, didn't rush in, didn't react. Because in her world, reacting without proof, that could cost you everything. Your job, your name, your peace. And Alan? He already looked at her like she had an agenda, like she was waiting for an opportunity. So telling him, without evidence, that wouldn't protect him. It would just push her away. But walking away, pretending she didn't hear it, that didn't sit right either. Not with her. She exhaled slowly, soft, controlled. Okay, barely above a whisper. Not agreement, not acceptance. Just a decision forming, because whether he trusted her or not, she had seen something, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's the part that changes everything. Not the betrayal, not the fall, but the moment someone decides, I'm not going to let this happen. So now let me ask you again, bestie. If you were in her position, no proof, no support, no trust from the very person you're trying to protect, would you step in, or would you stay quiet and protect yourself? Because what Arya chose to do next didn't just save a life, it changed both of theirs forever. And trust me, the way it all unfolded, the water, the silence, the moment everything almost slipped away. Yeah, you'll want to see how this plays out. Alan grew up in a house where everything looked balanced. On the outside, same roof, same last name, same father, but somehow, not the same experience. His siblings moved through life with a certain ease, doors opening, conversations flowing, decisions being made for them before they even had to ask. Alan noticed it early, not in big, obvious ways, but in the small things. Who got called into the office first? Who got advice? And who got silence? Who was corrected? And who was simply overlooked? He wasn't ignored completely, just not prioritized. And when their father finally decided to divide his wealth, it was presented as fairness, equal shares, equal opportunity. On paper, it made sense, but Alan didn't feel relieved. He felt aware because he understood something his siblings didn't. Having the same starting point doesn't mean you're given the same chances. The day everything was signed and distributed, his siblings celebrated. Plans, ideas, big conversations about expansion, partnerships, lifestyle. Alan, he didn't say much. He held the documents in his hand a little longer than necessary, eyes scanning numbers that didn't impress him. Not because they were small, but because they came without direction. No guidance, no support, just expectation. One of his siblings had glanced at him that day, half smiling. "You'll figure something out." It sounded encouraging, but it wasn't. It was distant, like they had already decided his outcome. Alan folded the document neatly. "Yeah," he replied, calm. "I will." No frustration, no argument, just a quiet acceptance of what had always been true. If anything was going to happen for him, he would have to make it happen, alone. And maybe that's what set everything in motion. Not the money, not the opportunity, but the silence that came with it. Because while they were celebrating what they were given, Alan was already thinking about what he could turn it into. The first move Alan made didn't look impressive. No big announcement, no flashy deal, just a decision. Quick, calculated, and very intentional. He didn't spread his resources across multiple ideas like his siblings did. He focused one direction, one opportunity, and he went all in. Days blurred into nights. Calls, research, negotiations. He studied patterns others ignored, moved faster than people expected. And more importantly, he didn't wait for approval. At first, no one noticed. Why would they? To his siblings, he was still the quiet one, the one who kept to himself, the one they didn't really need to worry about. Then the numbers started shifting, subtle at first. A return here, a closed deal there, then something bigger, and then momentum. Within weeks, what Alan had started began to grow, not slowly, not cautiously, but aggressively. Every decision feeding the next, every move building on the last. He wasn't guessing, he was executing. About a month in, one of his siblings reached out, casual. "Hey, heard you've been busy." Alan leaned back in his chair, phone pressed lightly to his ear. "Yeah, just working." A pause. Then, "Doing what, exactly?" Alan didn't answer immediately. Not because he didn't want to, but because he already understood the shift in tone. Interest, not concern. "Building something," he said simply. By the end of the second month, it wasn't quiet anymore. It couldn't be. The numbers were too large, the growth too fast, the impact too obvious. Alan had taken what he was given and turned it into something that didn't just compete with the family wealth. It overtook it, nearly all of it. And that's when everything changed. Because success like that doesn't stay unnoticed. It draws attention, questions, and sometimes the wrong kind of interest. And somewhere, in the background of that rising success, his siblings stopped seeing him as the underestimated one. They started seeing him as something else entirely. By the time people realized, Alan wasn't just doing something on the side. It was already too late to catch up, because what started as a focused move turned into a company that moved fast, faster than most people were comfortable with. Alan didn't build the way others did. No slow introductions, no waiting for approval, no long chains of meetings just to make a single decision. He built with urgency, precision, every move connected to something bigger. He secured partnerships quietly at first, not the loud, attention-seeking kind, the strategic ones, the kind that multiplied value instead of just adding to it. Then came expansion, not random, calculated. He understood where to place resources, where to pull back, where to push harder. And most importantly, he didn't hesitate. Inside his workspace, everything reflected that same mindset. Clean, structured, no distractions. People who worked with him noticed something immediately. Alan didn't repeat himself. He didn't micromanage. He expected you to understand. Or step aside. One afternoon, during a meeting, someone hesitated while presenting numbers. Alan watched quietly for a moment. Then, "You're unsure." The man blinked, caught off guard. I just wanted to confirm." Alan shook his head slightly. "If you have to confirm at this stage, you're not ready to present." No raised voice, no aggression, just clarity. That was how he operated. Direct, efficient, unemotional on the surface. And it worked. Because within those same 2 months, what Alan built wasn't just profitable. It was dominant. His company began pulling in deals that others had been chasing for years. Investors who once ignored him, now they were calling, waiting, trying to get in. But Alan didn't rush to accept them. He remembered something clearly. How quiet things were when he started. So now, he chose carefully, very carefully. And from a distance, his siblings watched all of it unfold. Not as participants, not as supporters, but as observers. And the more they watched, the more one thing became clear. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't luck. This was control. And they didn't have it. Success changed Alan's position, but it didn't change his habits or his mindset. If anything, it made him more distant. Late nights became normal. Silence became routine. Even when the house was full, his children laughing, voices carrying through the rooms, Alan stayed focused, present, but not fully there. It wasn't neglect. It was protection, because somewhere along the way, he learned something that stayed with him. Relying on people came with a cost, and he wasn't willing to pay that again. Arya noticed it before anyone else said anything. The way he moved through the house, focused, controlled, always thinking 2 steps ahead. Even in simple conversations, there was a distance, like he was there physically. But his mind never fully settled. One evening, she watched him from across the room as he sat with his children. They were talking, laughing, and for a moment, he smiled, a real one. Then his phone rang, and just like that, the moment disappeared. Arya looked away quietly. "That's exhausting." She didn't say it loudly, didn't need to, because what she saw wasn't just a man building something powerful. She saw someone carrying everything alone, and somewhere else in that same house, the tension was growing. Quietly, his siblings visited more often now, not loudly, not aggressively, but with a presence that felt different. Longer stares, shorter conversations, smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. Alan noticed. Of course he did, but he didn't confront it, didn't question it. He simply adjusted, stayed sharper, more aware, because even without clear proof, something didn't feel right. And in a house where everything looked calm on the surface, that feeling was enough. The visits became more frequent after Alan's company started dominating. Not loud visits, not confrontational, just consistent. At first, it looked harmless. Family dropping by, checking in, sitting a little longer than usual. But Arya noticed something subtle. They didn't come to spend time with him. They came to watch. One afternoon, all 3 of them arrived together again. Unannounced, but not unexpected. Alan was in the living area when they walked in, calm as always, phone in hand, finishing a call. "I'll get back to you," he said quietly before ending it. He looked up, saw them, no surprise, just awareness. "You're all here," he said. One of them smiled, stepping forward. "What, we can't visit our own brother?" The tone was light, almost playful, but it didn't feel that way. Alan gestured toward the seating area. "Sit." They did. Comfortable, too comfortable. For a moment, no one spoke. Just small glances, subtle exchanges between them, like something had already been discussed before they got there. Arya moved quietly in the background, setting things in place, but her attention stayed on them. Because the energy in the room had shifted again. That same quiet tension. One of the siblings leaned back slightly. "You've been busy." Alan nodded once. "Yes." Another leaned forward. "We've been watching what you're doing." That word, watching, hung in the air longer than it should have. Alan didn't react. Not outwardly. "It's impressive," the first one added. There was a brief pause, and for a second, it almost sounded genuine. Almost. Alan placed his phone on the table slowly. "What do you want?" No irritation, no impatience, just direct. That question shifted the room. Slightly, the smiles stayed, but they tightened. One of them let out a small breath. Straight to it. Alan didn't respond, because he already knew this wasn't a visit. It was a move, and whatever they came to say had already been decided before they walked through that door. A few minutes later, they moved into Alan's office. The atmosphere changed immediately. The space was controlled, structured, everything in place, no distractions. Alan took his seat behind the desk, posture relaxed but alert. His siblings sat across from him, close enough to feel like a conversation, far enough to feel like negotiation. No one rushed to speak. Not yet. One of them finally leaned forward, resting their elbows on their knees. "You've built something strong." Alan didn't respond. Another added, "Faster than we expected." That one carried a bit more weight, not admiration, recognition. Alan's eyes moved between them briefly. "Say what you came to say." A small silence followed. Then, "We've been thinking." The tone was measured, careful. Alan waited. "It doesn't make sense for us to stay separate anymore." He didn't interrupt. "We're family," another one added. "We should be building together." Alan leaned back slightly, not defensive, just observing. "Together, how?" he asked. There it was, the moment. The first sibling exchanged a quick glance with the others, then looked back at him. "We join your company." The words landed clean, direct, no hesitation. Alan didn't respond immediately, not because he was surprised, but because he was measuring something deeper than the request itself. "Your company becomes ours," another one continued, voice steady. A brief pause settled between them. Alan's fingers rested lightly on the arm of his chair. Still, controlled. "You've already built the structure," one of them added. "We scale it together." For a second, it almost sounded reasonable, logical, even beneficial, but something underneath it didn't sit right. Alan's gaze didn't shift, didn't soften, because he understood something they weren't saying out loud. This wasn't about unity. It was about access, and once given, it couldn't be taken back. The room didn't move after that. Not physically, but something in the air shifted. Tighter, heavier. Alan didn't rush to answer. He let the silence sit. Because sometimes, what people reveal after a request matters more than the request itself. One of his siblings straightened slightly. "We're not talking about interfering with what you've built." Another nodded quickly. "Exactly. You stay in control. We just come in, align things." The words sounded careful, polished. Alan's gaze remained steady. "Align how?" A brief hesitation. "Not long, but enough. We bring in our networks," one of them said. "Expand faster, secure bigger deals." Another added, "You've done well alone. Imagine what happens if we combine everything." There it was again. That word, combine. Alan's fingers tapped lightly once against the armrest, then stopped. "And ownership?" he asked. That question landed differently, sharper. A glance passed between them, quick, almost unnoticed. "We adjust structure," one replied. "Make it fair." "Fair." Alan repeated the word quietly. "Fair." No emotion in his tone, but something behind his eyes shifted, because he understood now. This wasn't about helping him grow. It was about redistributing what he had already built. "You've already taken the risk," another said, leaning forward slightly. "Now we make it bigger. Together." For a second, there was a stillness, and then Alan exhaled softly. No, not loud, not aggressive, just final. The word didn't echo. It didn't need to. It settled, heavy, unmovable. One of his siblings blinked. No? Alan's posture didn't change. Everyone should grow individually. Mixing everything now creates problems later. His tone stayed even, measured, like he wasn't rejecting them, just setting a boundary. But that's not how they heard it. A small laugh slipped out from one of them, not amused, just sharp. Problems? They repeated. Alan nodded once. Yes. Another leaned back slowly, eyes narrowing just a fraction. So, that's it? No answer. You don't think we're capable of handling it? The question came out lighter than it felt. Alan met their gaze. That's not what I said. A pause. Then, but that's what you meant. The room cooled. The smiles that had been carefully held from the beginning finally gave way. Not completely, but enough. There was something else there now. Something less controlled. One of them leaned forward again, voice lower this time. You built this off what the family gave you. Alan didn't react. And now you're saying we don't get to be part of it? Another added, after everything? That word, everything, hung strangely, because they both knew it didn't mean the same thing to Alan. He sat there for a moment, still, thinking. Then finally, I said no. No explanation, no expansion, just clarity. And that was the moment everything shifted. Not loudly, not visibly, but internally. Because what started as a request turned into something else entirely. You could see it in their expressions now. Not open anger, not yet, but something underneath, tighter, colder. One of them stood first, slow, controlled. All right. Another followed. We hear you. But they didn't, not really. As they turned to leave, one of them paused briefly at the door, just for a second, then walked out without another word. And in that quiet exit, something settled into place. Not agreement, not acceptance, resentment. And from that point forward, they weren't trying to be part of his success anymore. They were thinking about how to take it. Arya had been in Alan's life long before things became complicated. Not in the way people would assume, not close, not personal, just present. She moved through his home with a quiet confidence that didn't ask for attention, not loud, not overly expressive, but aware, always aware. Her role was simple on paper. She helped manage the home, stayed close to the children, handled things that needed consistency and care. But what made her different wasn't the work. It was how she carried herself. She didn't rush when others did, didn't speak just to fill silence. And she didn't adjust her tone depending on who stood in front of her, even around Alan. That stood out, because most people around him, especially after his rise, shifted, subtly, their voices softer, their posture more careful, their words filtered. Arya didn't do that. If something needed to be said, she said it. Calm, direct, without trying to impress him. One evening, while the house settled into its usual rhythm, Alan passed through the sitting area. His children were laughing. Arya sat nearby, watching them, not distracted, not on her phone, just present. Alan paused briefly, not intentionally, just noticing. They've eaten? He asked. Arya nodded once. Yes. Homework? Done. Simple answers. No extra explanation. Alan studied her for a second longer than necessary. There was something about her composure. It didn't fit the pattern he was used to. Most people in her position tried to be agreeable, approachable, careful. Arya wasn't difficult, but she wasn't accommodating either. She just existed on her own terms. And that made her hard to read. Alan moved on without another word. But that brief pause, it stayed with him longer than he expected. Because in a world where most people adjusted themselves around him, she didn't, and whether he realized it or not, that difference mattered. Arya didn't come from comfort, not the kind that cushions mistakes or softens consequences. She came from a life where things had to be handled immediately, no delay, no second chances waiting around. Her upbringing wasn't built on luxury. It was built on responsibility. Early mornings, long days, and a constant understanding that nothing would be handed to her. She learned quickly, if you don't stand for yourself, people will decide your worth for you. And she wasn't willing to let that happen. There were moments in her past that could have shaped her differently. Moments where it would have been easier to depend on someone else, to settle, to accept less. But she didn't, not because it was easy, but because she understood the cost of it. So she built herself carefully, piece by piece. Her voice, controlled. Her decisions, intentional. Her boundaries, clear, even when life didn't go in her favor. And it didn't, more times than she would admit. She didn't break, she adjusted, and that's why, when she stepped into Alan's environment, she didn't shrink. She observed, understood the space, and found her place within it, without losing herself. One night, after putting the children to bed, she stood in the kitchen for a moment longer than necessary. Quiet, still. Her mother's voice echoed faintly through a phone call earlier that evening, reminding her, as always, to stay focused. Stay grounded. Arya exhaled softly. I'm fine. It wasn't said with frustration, just certainty, because no matter where she was, no matter who stood in front of her, she carried one thing with her that didn't change: self-respect. And that was something no one could take from her. Arya's strength didn't come from nowhere. It came from where she was raised. And who raised her? Her mother had always been steady, not soft in the way people expect, but present, consistent, the kind of presence that didn't need to speak loudly to be felt. Growing up, Arya learned early that family wasn't just about closeness. It was about responsibility, showing up, even when you were tired, even when life didn't feel fair. There were no long speeches in her home, no dramatic lessons, just simple truths, repeated through actions. If something needed to be done, you did it. If someone needed support, you gave it. If things got hard, you didn't disappear. That stayed with her. Even now, working in a house that looked nothing like the one she grew up in, she didn't lose that grounding. She checked in with her mother often. Short conversations, nothing excessive. You eating properly? Her mother would ask, yes. You resting? When I can. It was never about long conversations. It was about knowing someone was there. And when things felt uncertain, that connection steadied her. Arya carried that same sense of responsibility into everything she did. Especially with Alan's children. She didn't treat it like a task or a job to get through. She paid attention, the way they spoke, the way they reacted, the things they didn't say out loud, because she understood something important. Children notice more than people think. And in a house where their father was constantly moving, constantly building, she became a point of consistency, not overly affectionate, not distant, just reliable. One evening, while helping one of them with something small, she paused for a second, watching the child focus, then nodded slightly to herself. You're okay. It wasn't reassurance, it was acknowledgement. And that's how she operated. Quiet strength. Not loud enough to draw attention, but strong enough to hold everything steady. And maybe that's why. She noticed the cracks forming around her before anyone else did. Because she wasn't distracted by appearances. She paid attention to what felt off. And in that house, something had already begun to shift. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. No tension, no raised voices. Just a moment that stayed longer than it should have. Arya stood near the dining area, going over something small with one of the children. Alan entered, mid-call, voice low and controlled. He ended it quickly. His eyes moved to her. We need to adjust their schedule, he said, walking closer. Arya looked up. Adjust how? More structured time, less flexibility. She nodded once, then added, they've been keeping up well with what they have. Alan paused. Just slightly. That's not the point. Her expression didn't change. Then what is? There was a brief silence. He studied her. Consistency matters more than comfort. Arya held his gaze. They're not lacking consistency. That should have been the end of it. A simple exchange. But something shifted. Alan exhaled lightly, tone tightening just enough to be noticed. Let's keep it professional, Arya. The words landed clean, but the meaning underneath. Clear, she didn't respond immediately. Her posture straightened slightly, not defensive, just firm. I am being professional. He tilted his head slightly, then keep it that way. There it was, not loud, not direct, but unmistakable. The assumption that she might be crossing a line, that she might be aiming for something more. Arya's eyes didn't leave his. You think I'm doing something else? Alan didn't answer, didn't need to, and that silence said everything. A quiet pause settled between them. Then she spoke again, slower this time, measured. You don't know me. Not emotional, not raised, just certain. Alan held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary. Something unreadable passed between them. Not agreement, not conflict, something else. Because beneath the tension, there was something neither of them addressed. Awareness, the kind that doesn't come from comfort, but from friction. And for the first time, Alan didn't respond immediately. He just looked at her, then nodded once, slightly, and walked away, leaving behind a silence that didn't feel empty, just unresolved. And in that unresolved space, something had already started forming. Not trust, not yet, but something that would be harder to ignore with time. It happened on a day that didn't feel important. No tension in the air, no raised voices, nothing obvious. The house moved the way it always did. Routine, controlled, predictable. Alan had stepped out briefly, work as usual. His siblings arrived not long after. Unannounced again, Arya was in the sitting room with the children, one of them laughing, the other trying to explain something that didn't quite make sense. She listened, nodded, corrected gently, present. Then she stood. I'll be right back. It was supposed to be quick, just a short step away. But as she moved past the hallway leading toward the private lounge, she heard voices, low, careful. She slowed down, not fully stopping, just listening enough to notice something wasn't right. Alan's siblings. The tone wasn't casual. It wasn't relaxed. It was controlled. He's not going to agree, one voice said. Another responded, quieter. We already know that. Arya paused. This time fully, her hand rested lightly against the wall. She didn't move closer. Didn't need to. The words carried just enough. So we stop asking. A short silence followed. Not empty. Just heavy. And then we take him somewhere quiet. No interruptions. Arya's breathing shifted slightly. Not fast. Just aware. She stayed still, because something inside her had already started connecting the pieces. This wasn't frustration. This wasn't business. This was something else. And the more she listened, the clearer it became. The voices dropped even lower, but not enough. If he won't let us in. A pause. We take everything. The words didn't come out rushed. They came out decided. Another voice followed. He won't see it coming. A quiet exhale. He trusts the situation. That's enough. Arya's fingers pressed slightly against the wall now. She wasn't reacting outwardly, but inside, something tightened. The boat makes sense, one of them added. No one around, no questions. A brief pause. Then, and after that, it's done. No hesitation, no doubt, just certainty. Arya swallowed slowly. Her mind didn't race. It focused. Every word settled into place, one after another. And with each sentence, the situation became harder to ignore. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a plan. And not just any plan. A final one. She didn't stay any longer. Didn't risk being noticed. She stepped back carefully, quiet, controlled, and walked away like she hadn't heard anything at all. But the moment she reached the corner, she stopped, just for a second. This isn't right. Barely a whisper. Not fear, not panic, just recognition. Because she understood exactly what those words meant. And once you understand something like that, you can't pretend you didn't hear it. Arya returned to the sitting room like nothing had happened. The children were still there, still laughing, Still unaware, she resumed her place, sat down, answered a question, nodded at something small. From the outside, everything looked the same, but inside, nothing was. Her mind moved carefully now, not fast, not scattered, just deliberate. Tell him. The thought came first, simple, direct, but just as quickly, another followed. How? She leaned back slightly, eyes resting on the children but not fully seeing them. What would she say? That she overheard something? That his own siblings were planning something serious? Without proof? Her jaw tightened slightly, because she knew how that would sound, like an assumption, like overstepping, like trying to insert herself where she didn't belong. And Alan? He already looked at her with distance, already believed she might have an angle. She could see it clearly. The way the conversation would go. You're misunderstanding. Stay within your role. Don't involve yourself in things you don't understand. The thought settled heavily. She shifted slightly in her seat. If she spoke too early, she risked losing everything. Her position, her stability, even her credibility. But if she said nothing, her eyes lowered briefly, then something worse could happen. A longer silence followed, not around her. Inside her, she inhaled slowly, held it for a moment. Think, barely audible, because reacting wasn't enough. She needed to be sure, not just about what she heard, but about what she would do next. And that decision? It wasn't simple. It wasn't just about him. It was about her, her position, her future, and whether she was willing to risk all of it. On something she couldn't yet prove. The rest of the day passed without interruption. On the surface, Alan returned later. Same pace, same focus. Nothing in his expression suggested he knew anything had shifted. Arya watched him briefly from across the room. He moved the way he always did, controlled, certain, unaware. That made it harder, because now she knew something he didn't, and that kind of knowledge, it changes how you see everything. She considered approaching him more than once, even took a step forward at one point, then stopped, because the reality stayed the same. No recording, no evidence, no way to prove what she heard. Just words, and words, without proof, could be turned against her. Later that evening, she stepped outside briefly, the air cooler, quieter. She folded her arms lightly, looking ahead without really focusing on anything. This could go wrong. Not dramatic, not exaggerated, just honest, because she understood the weight of it now. If she acted too soon, she could lose everything she had built. If she waited too long, someone else could lose far more. Her grip tightened slightly against her arms. This wasn't a situation she could ignore, and it wasn't one she could rush into either. That tension, that space between action and hesitation, stayed with her, unsettled, and from that moment on, every step she took would have to be calculated, because whatever she chose next would change everything. Not just for him, but for her, too. The invitation came casually, too casually. It was late afternoon when Alan's phone rang. He glanced at the screen briefly before answering. Yeah. A pause. He listened. From where she stood, Arya couldn't hear the other side, but she watched him. His expression didn't change much. It rarely did. Now? He asked. Another pause. All right. He ended the call and placed the phone down. Arya's eyes stayed on him for just a second longer than usual. Something came up? She asked. Alan looked toward her briefly. They want to go out. No elaboration, but she already knew who they were. Out where? He adjusted his sleeve slightly. Boat. Just time together. That word, together, didn't sit right. Arya nodded once, didn't question it further, but inside, everything tightened, because nothing about what she overheard matched something like this. Not the tone, not the intent. And now, this? It wasn't coincidence. Alan moved toward the door without hesitation. No second thought, no suspicion. He trusted the situation, and that was exactly what made it dangerous. Arya stood still for a moment, after he left the room. Her mind didn't rush. It aligned. Everything she heard before now had direction. It's happening. Soft, controlled, not panic. Recognition. Because the plan wasn't just talk anymore. It was in motion. The house felt different the moment Alan stepped out. Not louder, not quieter, just off. Arya moved slowly through the space, her awareness sharper than usual. Every detail mattered now. Every movement, every decision. She replayed the conversation in her mind. Each word, each pause. The boat, no interruptions, no witnesses. Her jaw tightened slightly. This wasn't something she could ignore anymore. Not after seeing how easily he agreed to go. Not after realizing how unprepared he was. She walked toward the window, watching as Alan stepped outside. Calm, focused, no sign that anything was wrong. That made it worse, because danger doesn't always look obvious. Sometimes, it waits for the moment when you feel the safest. Arya stepped back from the window. Her thoughts moved quickly now, but not recklessly. She had time, a little, enough to act, but not enough to hesitate. She knew one thing clearly. If she did nothing, there wouldn't be another chance. Her fingers flexed slightly at her sides. Move. A quiet push. Not emotional. Just decisive. Because whatever she chose next had to be right. Arya didn't waste time once the decision settled. No pacing. No second-guessing. She moved straight to her room, closing the door quietly behind her. Her phone was already in her hand before she even sat down. She scrolled once, stopped, pressed call. It rang twice. Hello? Her mother's voice came through, steady as always. Arya didn't rush her words. I need you to come over. A pause, not long, just enough to recognize the tone. Is everything okay? Arya leaned slightly against the edge of the table. I need you here with the kids. Now. Another pause. Then, I'm on my way. No questions. No delay. The call ended. Arya lowered the phone slowly. That part was done. Next, proof. She stepped back into the hallway. Movements controlled. The siblings were still inside. Still talking. She didn't go close. Didn't risk being seen. Instead, she placed her phone carefully on a nearby surface. Angled, just enough. Recording, not perfect. Not guaranteed, but better than nothing. Her eyes stayed on the space for a moment longer. This wasn't about curiosity. It was about securing something real, something that couldn't be denied later. Because if things went wrong, and they would, she needed something stronger than words. She stepped away quietly, no hesitation, because now, she wasn't just reacting. She was preparing. By the time her mother arrived, everything was already in motion. The children were settled, safe. Arya didn't explain much, didn't need to. Stay with them, she said simply. Her mother looked at her for a second, studied her, then nodded. Go, that was enough. Arya turned and moved quickly. Outside, the air felt different, heavier. The path toward the dock was quiet. Too quiet. She could already see the boat in the distance. Alan was there, standing near the edge, unaware. His siblings moved around him, casual, controlled, like everything was normal. Arya slowed slightly as she approached. She couldn't walk up openly, not now. So she adjusted her path, moved along the side, kept her steps light. Every sound felt louder than it should have. The water stretched out ahead, still, unmoving, and that stillness, it didn't feel peaceful. It felt like something waiting. Arya reached the edge of the dock, paused. Her grip tightened slightly on the small bag she had prepared. Everything was in place. There was no more time to rethink anything. Just go. A quiet push. And then, she moved, carefully, silently, slipping onto the boat without drawing attention, finding a position out of sight. Still, focused, watching, because now, there was no turning back. And whatever happened next She would be right there when it did. The boat began to move, slow at first, then steady, carrying all of them further away from shore, further away from safety, and deeper into something that was already set in motion. The boat cut through the water steadily, no rush, no tension on the surface. Alan stood near the edge, hands resting lightly against the railing, looking out, calm. Behind him, his siblings moved around casually, talking, light laughter, normal, too normal. From where she hid, Arya watched everything, every movement, every glance, nothing obvious, but something underneath it all felt wrong. The air carried a strange stillness. Then, it shifted. One of them stepped closer to Alan, slow, unhurried. Another moved slightly to the side. Positioning, Alan didn't turn immediately, didn't sense it. And that was all they needed. The moment came without warning. A sharp movement, fast, a hand swung. Impact. A dull, heavy sound. Alan's body jerked forward slightly, then slackened. No time to react, no time to defend. His grip slipped from the railing, and just like that, he dropped. Arya's breath caught, but she didn't move. Not yet, because everything was happening too fast. Alan hit the deck hard, unconscious, no resistance, no voice, just still. And for a second, there was silence. Then, do it. Low, direct, no hesitation. One of them crouched beside Alan briefly, checked him. He's out. Another stepped closer, looked down at him. No panic, no second thoughts. Just confirmation. Arya's fingers tightened slightly where she hid. Her heart didn't race. It dropped, because now, there was no doubt. This wasn't a threat. It was happening, right in front of her. She stayed still, forced herself to, because one wrong move now would change everything. Her breathing stayed controlled, but heavier. She watched as they reached for him, not gently. They grabbed his arms, lifted him like weight, nothing more. One of them glanced around briefly. No witnesses, just open water and silence. Arya's chest tightened. She wanted to move, to stop it, but she couldn't, not yet, because if she revealed herself too soon, she wouldn't be able to save him at all. And that thought, that single realization, held her in place, still, watching, as the moment she feared the most unfolded completely. They didn't hesitate, not even for a second. Alan's body hung between them, lifeless, unresponsive, heavy in a way that made it clear he wasn't waking up anytime soon. One of them adjusted their grip. Another stepped closer to the edge. Now, that word was quiet, but final. They lifted him. For a brief second, his head tilted slightly, a faint line of blood still visible near his temple. Then, they let go. His body dropped over the side. A short fall, then the water swallowed him. No splash that echoed, no struggle, just a clean disappearance. Arya's chest tightened sharply. Her vision locked onto the spot where he vanished. Gone. Just like that. The surface settled quickly, almost too quickly. Behind her, she heard movement again. It's done. Another voice responded. Let's move. No panic, no urgency, just closure. Arya stayed where she was, still hidden, still silent. Her mind didn't process it emotionally. Not yet. It focused on one thing, timing. Because if she moved too early, they would see her. If she waited too long, he wouldn't come back up. Seconds passed, each one heavier than the last. Then, the engine shifted. The boat began to move again, pulling away, leaving nothing behind, except water and silence. Arya's grip tightened around the edge beside her. Now, barely a whisper. And then, she moved. She didn't think, didn't hesitate. She ran forward and jumped. The water hit hard, cold, sharp. It stole her breath instantly. But she forced herself under, eyes open, searching, nothing, just darkness, movement. Her lungs tightened. She pushed deeper. arms reaching. Then, her fingers brushed something. Fabric. She grabbed, pulled. Alan's body drifted just below her, unmoving, heavy. Come on. The words came out in broken breath as she pulled him upward. They broke the surface together. Air hit her lungs again. Rough. Uneven. Alan didn't move, didn't respond. His head tilted slightly to the side. Still, Arya adjusted her hold, struggling to keep him above water. Her arms strained, her legs fought to stay steady. The boat. Gone. Too far now. No help. Just her. And him. Stay with me. Please. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Soft, but urgent. She shifted again, reaching for the small pack she had secured earlier, hands shaking slightly. She pulled out the life support gear. It took effort, more than it should have, but she got it around him, secured it. Barely. Her strength was fading, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Every movement mattered now. She turned her body, pulling him along as she began moving toward the direction of shore. Slow, painfully slow, her breathing uneven, her muscles burning. But she kept going, because stopping wasn't an option. And letting go? That never crossed her mind. Not once, even as the distance stretched, even as her body pushed against its limit. She held on, because in that moment, he wasn't just the man who doubted her, he was someone who needed her. And that was enough. The hospital room stayed quiet for days, not empty, just controlled. Machines hummed steadily. Monitors blinked in soft intervals. Alan didn't move. Not at first. The impact had done more than knock him out. It held him there, between awareness and silence. Arya didn't stay in the room constantly, but she came back, checked, watched from a distance when needed, not out of obligation, just making sure. Doctors spoke in careful tones. Severe head trauma. Stability is improving. Recovery will take time. Time stretched. 1 day into 2, 2 into a week, then weeks, 3 to be exact. Through it all, Alan remained still. No recognition, no reaction, just presence. Arya didn't try to force anything, didn't speak to him like he could hear her. She simply made sure he wasn't alone, even if she wasn't right beside him. She stayed connected to what was happening. Updates, small changes, subtle signs. Because something in her refused to let that moment on the water be the end of his story. Then, one morning, something shifted. Not dramatically, just enough. His fingers moved slightly, a small motion, barely noticeable, but it was real. Hours later, his eyes opened, slow, unfocused. The light above him felt too bright. The room, unfamiliar. His breathing adjusted unevenly. Where? The word didn't come out fully, but it was enough. He was back, confused, weak, but alive. And that changed everything. Arya wasn't in the room when he woke up. Not immediately. She got the call instead. Short, direct. He's awake. She didn't respond right away, just closed her eyes briefly. Then, okay. She didn't rush to the hospital, not yet, because she knew something. This conversation couldn't be rushed. He needed clarity, and she needed to say it right. Later that day, her phone rang. His number. She looked at it for a second, then answered. Hello? There was a pause. His voice came through. Low, strained. Arya? She straightened slightly. Yes. Another pause. I was told you were there. His words came slowly, carefully. What happened? That question sat between them, heavy. Arya didn't answer immediately, because this wasn't just information, it was truth. And once said, it couldn't be taken back. She exhaled quietly. You were attacked. Silence. Then, by who? No hesitation this time. Your siblings. The line stayed quiet, longer than expected. Then, a slight shift in his breathing. No, not denial. Just disbelief. Arya's voice didn't change. I heard them before it happened. I saw it happen. Another silence. Then, they wouldn't. He stopped, didn't finish, because something inside him already knew. Arya continued. They took you out on the boat. No one else around. A small pause. And they left you there. The truth settled, not loudly, but deeply. And on the other end of the call, Alan didn't respond immediately, because some realizations don't come with words. They come with silence. And this one? Cut deeper than anything he had faced before. The days after that call didn't slow down. If anything, everything moved faster. Alan didn't stay passive, not anymore. Once the truth settled in, even partially, he acted, not recklessly, not emotionally, but with the same precision that built everything he owned. The first step was quiet. Legal teams, private conversations. Then came the evidence. Arya brought what she had, the recording, not perfect, but clear enough. Voices, plans, intent. It didn't need to be long. It just needed to be real, and it was. Alan listened to it once, didn't replay it, didn't need to, because hearing it even once was enough. His expression didn't change much while it played, but when it ended, he leaned back slightly. That's enough. No anger in his voice, no raised tone, just decision. Everything that followed happened in sequence, clean, direct. Authorities got involved, statements were taken, evidence reviewed. His siblings were called in. At first, they denied it. Of course they did. But denial doesn't hold long when proof exists. The recording closed the gaps. And soon, the situation turned from private conflict to legal consequence. Arrests were made, not dramatic, not chaotic, just final. And along with it came accountability. The damage done wasn't small. Medical, financial, structural, all of it calculated, and all of it returned. Compensation followed, not as a favor, not as negotiation, but as obligation, because what they tried to take and what they nearly destroyed had a cost. And now, they had to face it. It should have ended there. Justice served, truth exposed, but it didn't, because while everything was being reviewed, something else surfaced, something older, buried in documents, records, decisions made long before Alan understood them. At first, it didn't seem connected, just information, until it wasn't. Alan sat across from his legal advisor, file open in front of him. There's something you need to see. He didn't respond, just looked, page after page. Then, he stopped. His eyes narrowed slightly. What is this? The advisor hesitated briefly. It's part of the inheritance structure. Alan's fingers pressed lightly against the edge of the paper. Explain it. A pause. Then, you weren't listed the same way as the others. Silence. Meaning? The answer came carefully. You're not their full sibling. The room didn't move. Not physically, but something inside him did. What? The word came out quieter than expected. Not sharp, not loud, just stunned. The advisor continued. You share a father, not the same mother. Another pause. And because of that, your allocation was structured differently. Alan didn't respond. His eyes stayed on the document, reading it again, slower this time. Then, another detail surfaced. Numbers, adjustments, transfers. His expression shifted slightly. This doesn't add up. The advisor nodded. It doesn't. A breath passed through the room. Before you built your company, a portion of what was yours was already redirected. Alan looked up. By who? The answer didn't need to be explained. He already knew. His siblings. Not just recently, but before the success, before the refusal, before everything. They had already taken from him, and still, they wanted more. A quiet silence followed, longer this time, because this wasn't just betrayal. This was history, pattern, Proof that what happened on that boat was never sudden. It was built over time. Alan leaned back slowly, his gaze unfocused for a moment. So it was never about joining me. No one answered. They didn't need to, because the truth was clear now. It was never about unity. It was about control. And when they couldn't control him, they tried to remove him. That realization didn't come with anger, not immediately. It came with something heavier, a quiet collapse. Not physical, but internal, because everything he thought he understood about his family had just changed. And in that moment, Alan didn't speak again. He just sat there, processing, rebuilding his understanding of everything that led him here, and realizing the betrayal didn't start on the boat. It started long before he even knew to question it. And somehow, that made it worse. But it also did something else. It removed doubt completely. And once doubt is gone, what remains is clarity. And Alan now had all of it. Recovery didn't just change Alan physically. It shifted something deeper. The man who once moved through everything with quiet control now moved with awareness, not slower, not weaker, just different. He noticed things he used to ignore, silences, reactions, the weight behind certain moments, especially the ones that involved people, because, for the first time, he couldn't deny what had happened. Not just the attack, not just the betrayal, but his own distance, the way he kept people out, the way he assumed before understanding, and the way that assumption almost cost him everything. He sat alone one evening, the hospital window slightly open, the outside world moving as if nothing had changed. But for him, everything had. His hand rested lightly against the edge of the chair, still healing, but steady. His thoughts didn't rush. They settled, replaying moments, conversations, one in particular, "You don't know me." Arya's voice, clear, unshaken. At the time, he dismissed it. Now, it meant something else. Because she was right. He didn't know her. And yet, she knew enough about him to save him. That realization stayed with him, not as guilt, but as clarity, because now he understood something he had ignored before. Trust isn't about control. It's about who stands when everything falls apart. And in that moment, on the water, there was only one person who did. When Alan finally saw Arya again, it wasn't dramatic. No grand setup, no heavy moment, just a room. Quiet. She stood near the door when he entered. Same posture, same composure. Nothing about her had changed, and that made it harder. Alan stopped a few steps away. For a moment, neither of them spoke, because this wasn't a conversation that needed to be rushed. It needed to be real. He looked at her, not quickly, not casually, fully. "You were right." The words came out slower than expected. Arya didn't respond immediately. She just watched him. Then, about what? Not defensive, just direct. Alan exhaled lightly. "About me not knowing you." A brief pause. "And still, you stayed." Arya's expression didn't soften. "Not yet. I did what needed to be done." Alan nodded once. "No," he said quietly. "You did more than that." Another silence. Then, he continued, "I misjudged you." No hesitation, no excuse, just truth. Arya looked at him for a moment longer, not surprised, not impressed, just processing. Yeah, simple, but not dismissive, because she understood something too. That kind of acknowledgement doesn't come easily, and even though she didn't respond emotionally, something in the space between them shifted. Not fully, but enough, because this time, the distance between them wasn't built on assumption. It was built on something else, understanding, and that changed everything moving forward. What grew between them didn't happen suddenly. No dramatic shift, no instant closeness. It built quietly. After that conversation, things didn't become easy, but they became honest. Alan didn't try to force anything, didn't step too close. He adjusted in small ways. He listened more, spoke less when it wasn't necessary, And for the first time, he paid attention to her without judgment. Arya noticed, of course she did, not in grand gestures, but in details, the way he paused before speaking to her now, the way his tone changed, slightly more measured, the way he didn't assume that mattered. One evening, they found themselves in the same space again, not planned. The house was quiet, the children already asleep. Arya stood near the kitchen finishing something small. Alan walked in, slower than usual. He stopped, not too close. "You've been handling everything well," he said. Arya glanced at him briefly. It needed to be done. A short pause. "Still," he added, "you didn't have to carry all of it." She set something down gently. "I'm used to it." There was no pride in her voice, no complaint either, just truth. Alan studied her for a moment. Then, "You shouldn't have had to." That line didn't come out perfect. It carried something else. Recognition. Arya didn't respond immediately. She just looked at him. Something softer passed through her expression. Brief, controlled, but real, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. And for a second, neither of them moved. The space between them felt different now. Not tense, just aware, because beneath everything, the distance that once defined them was slowly being replaced, not by comfort, but by something steadier, respect. Alan didn't delay his next decisions. The situation with his siblings was handled legally, completely, but safety. That required something more, so he made a choice. The children would be relocated, different country, different environment, not out of fear, but out of certainty. He wasn't going to leave room for anything like that to happen again. When he told Arya, he didn't present it as an order. He explained it. They'll be safer there. Arya nodded. That makes sense. A brief pause. Then he added, "You and your mother will go with them." She looked at him, not surprised, but measuring. "And you?" Alan exhaled lightly. "I'll follow after everything here is completely settled." Another pause. Then she nodded once. "All right." No hesitation, because deep down, she already understood. This wasn't distance. It was preparation. Time passed. Arrangements were made. The move happened smoothly. And, for the first time in a long time, things felt stable, not perfect, but steady. When Alan finally joined them later, it wasn't loud, no announcement, just presence. He found her one evening outside, standing quietly, taking in the calm around her. He walked up beside her, not too close. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, "I've been thinking," he said. She didn't turn immediately. "About what?" He took a breath. "Everything." A pause. Then, "I doubted the one person who saved me." The words stayed there, not heavy, just honest. Arya looked at him then, her expression steady. "You see things differently now." He nodded once. "Yeah." Another silence followed, but this one didn't feel unresolved. It felt complete, because what stood between them now wasn't misunderstanding. It was clarity and something else. Quiet, unspoken, but real, not rushed, not forced, just there. A connection built through tension, tested through action, and strengthened through truth. And this time, neither of them walked away from it. They stayed, and that made all the difference. Not forced, just there. A connection built through tension, tested through action, and strengthened through truth. And this time, neither of them walked away from it. They stayed, and that made all the difference.
Hope you enjoyed the story, and remember to subscribe. Bye.